Welcome to the Gospel Addict Podcast. I'm Greg Bryan.
And I'm Jim Reski.
We're gospel addicts because we believe the gospel of Jesus isn't just good news, it's the best news ever.
We're addicted to the gospel because it doesn't just start us out in the Christian life, it is the Christian life.
Join us as we look at the Bible through the lens of the gospel.
Thanks so much for listening.
This is kind of a special episode because I'm joined with my friend Sundeep, who is all the way in Scotland. And I also am joined with a good friend, Milam Shah. And this is like her first podcast. So Milam, let me start with you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'll be telling everybody that I finally did my first podcast.
All right, cool. Well, we're looking forward to talking to you. But Sundeep, I just want to start out and ask you just a couple questions. What do people misunderstand about you the most?
Wow. I think my wife is the only one who truly knows who I am, and everyone else misunderstands me. It's probably the closest. It's one of the great things, and to be fair, I play on this as well. I like being misunderstood. I don't know if you. About 6 years ago, I traveled around America with a beard, like a 2-foot long beard, wild hair, and I think I scared people on aeroplanes. Let's just say that, it was, and I'm sure they didn't presume I was a church elder at the time, or that I was a Christian and an evangelist, and so I like that. I like that people can sometimes just make up a mind through visuals, and.
Wasn't there a time when they actually, like at an airport, they pulled you out of line because they thought maybe you were a game?
They do that all the time, and it's fine. I'm not offended or insulted by that. I think it's natural. We're human. We make visual references on everything, and we're conditioned. What we see is what we refer. So if a bearded brown man is then associated with dangers, and that's what I come across, and I suppose that also then I like that because then you can play on that and flip it. You can then, when people really get to know you, you're able to sort of get behind people's perception and walls and ideas of you, and they get to see, okay, this I'm maybe. And we all do it. I do it on other people as well. I look at people and I think I've worked them out, and actually I love that, people are much deeper and more complex than just these visual things. So yeah, I'm probably misunderstood a lot.
A lot of times our first impressions are wrong. And that's the same with Jesus too, right? A lot of people, their first impression of who Jesus is not the right impression. I love that story recently about the Queen, where she was in Scotland and these Americans came and they were just kind of walking around. They met this old woman and this man, and they just started talking to them. And they asked the woman, how, does she live around here? She's like, yeah, I have a house over there. And then, how long have you been coming here? Oh, we've been coming here for decades. And then the Americans are like, oh, have you ever met the Queen? And the woman was the Queen, and the Queen said, well, I personally haven't met her, but he has, and he's spent a lot of time with her. And then the next thing you know, the Americans are like pulling him aside and getting their picture taken with him because he's been close to the Queen. And then I mean, that was a really, really cool story. But just, at some point they're gonna, well, by now they've realized that they were with the Queen.
Yeah. Story, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So for Milam's sake, even, could you just take a few minutes and just introduce yourself? Tell us your background.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like Milam and I both come from India, and she's from the north of India, up in the mountains in the Himalayas, and I'm from the south of India, a place called Hyderabad. And my parents were Christian, and my great grandfather was the first convert. I grew up in a medical mission charity working with leprosy and eye work. And I've been in Scotland now actually 30 years. Like 2 weeks ago was my 30th year. And it's weird because to me that's so important. I celebrate it. It's not important to anybody else. I mean, it's not like a birthday or something, but it is a real threshold moment of big sort of the naive migrant who comes across to study or do thinks they know the world and they don't, and yet the grace of God, the providence of God, the people that He provides in that journey that you come across, the character tools that have been put in by your family and your faith, and how that plays out in strange lands. It's been so powerful. And that's why to me it's an important sort of every year I remember the date 16th of September, because I've still got my passport stamped, on that date when I arrived.
What was it that brought you? What was the original?
I studied architecture in Dundee, so I did 7 years of architecture, and then worked as an architect and have done. And then about 10 years ago, me and three of my friends opened up a coffee shop. We were talking about kingdom spaces and evangelism and experience. People, where can you belong before you believe? Where does the community spaces? And these coffee shops have grown. There's about eight of them. It's been a really interesting journey. It's not been as tidy as I thought it would be. It hasn't been as evangelical as I would have presumed, but it's been powerful and deep. And you go into spaces that God takes you that you never knew were even there, and I think that's been one of the revelations in the journey to end up doing things that you never expected and meet people that you never expected, and then to just be the love of God to them. It isn't even about a conversion or a baptism or a pews and bums and seats sort of thing. It's just creating salt and light in a space. So
as you reflect on that, even in your business, what has been your biggest failure, and what did you learn from that experience? Maybe it was in this business realm, the coffee shop.
It's interesting. I mean, there's plenty of failures. I mean, character is probably one of them. You don't trust God. You fail in many things. You have your own sort of failings. I think marriage is a beautiful reminders of your inadequacies and and limitations. My wife can, like I said, will probably know as much as, like, I can be a presentation. I can be things that I want to be and aspire to be, and also reveal a certain part of me to others. Whereas at home, you are who you are, and how you and the people closest to you are the ones you interact with most, and they get to see who you are. And so failure isn't necessarily a negative word for me in that sense, because I feel, I think failure teaches you more than success. I think failure is a far greater, teacher and developer. Sometimes success can be self-serving, like, as in, I've reached the space, isn't it because what I did, and it could just be pure chance or providence or circumstance that gets you there, but you don't see that. You think my intent gets me here. Whereas it's like a child driving a car, like, oh, look at me driving this car, isn't it great? And you're like forgetting that you've been on someone's lap. You can't even reach the pedals or can't do any. We don't have those perceptions in success. But failure, I think that it's painful. It dents your ego. It dents your understanding of life. And if you don't learn from that space, then you don't develop and you cling to faith. And so when I think, like, we have 8 shops currently, but we've had 10 shops and we've closed 2 of them. So it's not like everything is growth and health and big and better. We went into COVID with 3 shops and came out with 8, and that sounds great, as a statistically, like, everyone's like, wow, you're so successful, but we're probably just as poor and working just as hard for the same money. It's not that suddenly we become 8 times, 5 times bigger. We've had to pivot and learn and change and find new ways of doing business. The old systems are gone. The old culture is gone. So yeah, plenty of failures, I would say, but they've not been places. They've not all. Well, they have been places of pain or regret or loss when they do happen. But I think I can definitely now sort of point and say, well, actually, they've been places of help, of growth, of learning, of discernment, and rethinking it, and I like that. That's good.
That's great. Just for Milam's benefit, could you just describe? So you have started some coffee shops in Scotland, and their name is Blend, right? Blend is the name of this coffee shop. And can you just explain like your philosophy and why you got into that business?
Yeah. I mean, I've been involved in Christian culture all my life. My parents were frontline Christians and working with leprosy work. So I saw it firsthand, saw missionary work, saw proclamation go. So, and myself, I went through youth work, worked in churches, always been involved in church culture and church life. And yet, you just realize that, especially living in Scotland, that most of the world haven't a clue what you're up to. The gospel isn't being proclaimed on the level you want to proclaim it, and Christ isn't being revealed and shared even close to where you want it to be. And it was just, I found it frustrating. I found that when we began discipling people, kids in our youth group, it exploded, it expanded. People wanted connection over content. They wanted to belong before they believed. We used to have mantras like spend more time with fewer people. We saw real change come out of those spaces rather than mid-50-year-old man on a stage talking to 100 or 200 people sitting in chairs facing in one direction. It seems a huge disconnect. And I read somewhere, like, I can't remember, it was just saying, most of Christian resources spent on convincing Christians to remain Christian, and it bit, it's like, wow, yeah, it's so true. And we have this strange model of preaching the gospel on a Sunday, 100 people, and hoping that 5 or 10 of them will go do something about it, and all the resources held in that place. And so we were wrestling with a lot of this stuff and saying, well, what's the alternative? Like, how do you? And there seems to be a default setting in Christian culture that the minute you want to do mission, you set up a charity, you set up and I'm not saying that's bad at all. I'm not condemning any of that, but that seems to be like a default memory, and we forget the rest of the world, and my father used to say, he worked in charity, but he used to say, like, so many charities just become one beggar giving another beggar somebody else's money, and you don't become sustainable. You're trying to. So to me, these are all sort of issues that influence and affect the church and how we think and what we do and what God is asking us to do. And so in these conversations, like, how do we create a place where your work is worship, that there are absolutely blurred lines between the sacred and the secular? It's all sacred. How do we go and how do we pursue an incarnate God, as in a God that's already in the neighborhood, that we have to discover, not introduce? And it is really big when you start thinking of it in those terms. It takes the pressure off you. You don't feel like you have to take the gospel somewhere. Your day is spent trying to discover where God is already, and you seeking those moments. And so we looked at what does any sort of service type of industry look like. We looked at gardening jobs and car washes and eventually landed at this coffee shop and said, okay, well, how do we create this coffee shop? And that's what we did. We opened. We didn't know anything about it. 4 friends. I was an architect. We had 2, a youth pastor and a pastor, and a kid I used to mentor through university who had done accounting, knew nothing about coffee, And in 6 months saw miraculous things and opened up a shop. And it was amazing in that it hit a nerve. We found, so the whole design of the coffee shop, if you look at it, it's blendcoffee.co.uk, if anyone wants to go check it out. But it's about creating a living room in the community It's like, what are our safe spaces left in our community? There are very, very few places that we will enter as a stranger anymore in our culture. I mean, a shop is probably what the last one where we used to window shop and go in. Our churches are gone, our pubs have gone, our community centers are gone. All the things that we could just walk in a stranger and feel comfortable and safe have disappeared. And I'm like, well, we need to recreate and reclaim those spaces. And I think there's a flaw in the process where we always invite people to things, like, hey, come here to my lovely place, whatever. Now, it's great. All the intent is good. But I always challenge, like, some of my friends. I was like, if someone tomorrow said, come to the mosque on Friday, all the sort of barriers that have lifted in our own heads right now, untruthful barriers, but they're there in our head, is what you're asking other people to jump over when you invite them to your safe space.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you create a safe space in the community, the place that a stranger can walk in? And so we use a lot of like living room analogy. We talk about a campfire space. What is the campfire space of our community? Nomads that travel through the day, come for a night, corral, share stories, sing songs, tell each other information about their journeys, and then leave in the morning. What does that begin to look like in our community? It's not about coffee. I mean, coffee, there's plenty of coffee and plenty of places that, can do it better than us. But how you make people feel, the belonging you can give people, the love and attention you can give people, these are huge things in this culture, in a culture of individualism and isolation.
Yeah, so I'm going to interrupt here for a second. So you've created a place where people can come and experience the aroma of Christ, because the people running the coffee shops by and large are Christ followers, and it's a safe place for them to kind of experience love and build relationships of a feeling of belonging, maybe before they believe. And I just want to bring Milam in here, because Milam has been part of a organization that I created called the Kent International Leadership Network, which is essentially a service organization, but it has kind of the same kind of missionary, or I should say, same kind of idea behind it. And so, Milam, could you share a little bit about how, you felt like you found a place to belong, and now you're starting to believe or follow Christ?
Yeah. So I came here, and obviously it's so difficult for an international student away from home. It's so scaring and so depressing. I would say, I've heard so many stories other than me that people who come here, they fall into depression and they don't know if they belong there, and why there's so uncertainty, to move across the world. And yeah, of course, India and US have just the opposite time zones. And all these things, you just feel, and you fell into this trap, of dark, dingy place. But Kent International Leadership Network that Greg has gives you that community space. Kent State, we have this motto that you belong here. But I really felt it in Kiln when I came here. These people help you with everything. And then it's just not, you get help, but it's that they create this community, like you said, that there might be another coffee place which serves you better coffee. So exactly, like here at Kent, there might be a lot of people who would help you. But to create that community, which is a safe space from people from different, cultures, different religions, different parts of the world, even different ages, genders, etc., etc., they all can have a place where they will feel safe. It's a safe haven for us. And we don't feel like we are being judged, even if we are something. And it's so important, because the world, there are so many people who would try to divide you over so many different, aspects and all these different topics, titles. But at the end, it's just so amazing when everybody can sit, they can share all their spiritual journey and anything, like how they started believing in what they believe in and who they believe in. and just share it without being like having that fear of being judged is very important. And I'm so glad that, you know, we have this space here at Ken. And to create this, it's so easily said that, oh, we created this community space, but it's so difficult. It is like one of the most impossible, near to impossible thing, that people can just walk in through the door and they would feel that they're at home and nobody's gonna judge them. So, and that too, in like, even if they're on a spiritual journey with Christ, wherever they are, they just started, or they have already been, you know, born and brought up like you in as a Christian household. So whatever they say, it's not being judged and all that. Like me, I started my journey and I'm still learning about Christ. And whatever I say or I question, it's always answered. It's not like anybody judges me that, you know, oh, you don't know about it, or why are you following this or that. So yeah, I mean, this is just a blessing. And I would say, you know, God creates all these blessings, and he thinks about you, and he sends all these people in your life. So,
Great.
so Greg is just like a messenger, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very blessed, Milam. You are just an amazing young lady, and I believe God has great things in store for you. And I feel blessed that I know you. Sundeep, do you have any questions for Milam about her journey?
Yeah, I mean, were you Christian in India? Was your family Christian, or?
No. So like, you know, I'm from a north, I'm a North Indian, and that too, I am from the Himalayas. We have a place, we believe in and I am a born Hindu, so we already have like 500 plus gods. And if you are from the northern area where you are surrounded by mountains, we also believe in elements. Like we worship our river, we worship our mountains and all that. And it's just that we believe that there's a part of God in everybody. So, and we have so many in India, like, you know, that there are so many different religions and all that. But I'm so blessed that my family and my parents are always open-minded, and they said that whatever, you know, whoever you thinks you believe in, you follow it. And yeah, I mean, that is one of the biggest step that, you know, your parents would tell you, that whoever you feel like it's not a religion. Like Christianity, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. And you cannot have a relationship with somebody you do not believe in. You might like them, but there's a difference. You really believe in them. So, and I studied in a convent school all my life, in a Catholic convent school. And I told Greg the story of mine, that, you know, I used to tell my parents had Christian friends and all that. So I used to go to church. I used to go to, I learned Our Father in Heaven first before any Hindu mantras. And I used to tell my parents, I want to be a Christian. And they never said that, oh, you want to be a Christian or something. I was always encouraged that, okay, you want to be a Christian. But like in our place, there was not a resource where a non-Christian can go and learn about Christ. We have it here. And I always, like, it was a wish. And then years passed by, I completed school, then I went to college and all that. Then I came here, and then I met Greg, and I told him, like, I forgot about all of that. I forgot that I had a wish as a 6-year-old child, a naive child, that I want to be a Christian. Out of the blue. And it's just amazing. Like, I feel that if I was looking for him, more than that, he was looking for me. He chose me. Inside my heart, inside a 6-year-old heart, like, why would a 6-year-old wish for something like, I want to be a Christian, out of the blue, you know? And it's just that there were no resources. But then I came here and I found resources, and I'm still on a journey, but it started before. Like, people say that, you know, you have to, like you said, that you have to feel belong before you believe. So I think it's the same for me. And I believed in him even before I knew what he did for us. Even before I knew any of his stories.
It's interesting that when I had my 5th year reunion at my university this past weekend, and like 45 of us from pretty much all around the world turned up for this thing, because it was so, and I was so amazing to have all these guys. Like, it was still important for us, But as looking back, my first year had all sorts of nonsense going on. There was, my best friend got beaten up, and we got caught up in a fire, and I had to, on a 4th floor, had to go, try to escape. There was a huge earthquake in India, 45 miles from where we live. I had 2.5 days on the phone trying to find out if my family was alive. I'd forgotten some of those things, but it was so important that my mother, when I came across it, said, "Look, go find a church, Sundeep. Even if you're not in a good place with God, just commit to me that you'll go find, go to church." So I was like, "Fine, I'll do it, whatever." But it was amazing, the family, one particular family that took care of me for literally 7 years in my university years, took every Sunday, fed and watered me, took me to hospital when I was having surgery, looked after my luggage when I didn't have a flat, or, had warm clothes and bed. It was those things. I mean, it wasn't the financial side of it. It was the attention side of it that was just so powerful to me rooting here, and through them getting a job in a laundry, through the laundry meeting my wife, to my wife settling in this country. It's like these little steps that take you along these journeys, and it's actually, culturally, like now, even podcast people listening, when we hear the noise of the culture clash that's going on right now all around us, don't forget the power of hospitality and the sojourner and the looking after the sojourner, the migrant, the person passing through. These are like gifts from God to us, to look after those who are powerless and you have nothing to get from, but you can just look at, and it's not about the big things, it's not about these major, you've got to house them and clothe, whatever. It's little acts of kindness, little acts of love, little acts of, filling in a form, whatever those things. These are powerful spaces that we can engage with kingdom work. We've lost some of those spaces and sort of champion these other spaces, like someone who, the guitar player on a stage and the pastor who's going to do whatever, and realize that, Jesus was not asking us to do any of those things. He gave us gifts to do it, but actually he did say, love your neighbor, and then defined what that neighbor was going to be. It was anybody, and I think in this culture world, the solution to a lot of this stuff is just acts of kindness that we can give to people you don't even need to know, and don't even need to know the consequence of your action for, but that's your relationship with God.
So are you saying that when you heard Milam share her story, you started thinking of memories?
Absolutely.
Back when you first came to Scotland, because you were basically an international student in Scotland.
Yeah, and it's so
now you've lived in Scotland longer than you've ever lived in India, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now they call them Oreos or Bounty Bars. I'm just brown on the outside. But it's I realize, like, this is now, like, when I look at my house, both my wife and I have tried to create an open house, a house of hospitality, a house of, and when I look at Blend, the business, that I realize that Blend is like, it's trying to give the safe space for those travelers, those unsafe people, because I'm literally trying to mimic what I experienced to the stranger. And when we don't have a church infrastructure that does it well, we've got to create alternative spaces. And you can start with your home, and you can start with your business, or whatever the thing is, because some of the old institutional spaces can't think like that. There's just no mechanisms and scale to do that. But there are new spaces where we can do that, where we can find within our own lives, our own sort of working experiences, places where we can look after someone and give them a safe space.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things that I have seen, like, I'm still learning about Jesus and all that. And, as a child, I am a child in the spiritual journey, and as a child, you ask a lot of questions, and those questions make you question more. And and you because you're not rigid in what you believe in. You still have those possibilities inside your head, and that's what I felt like even back in India, even here in US, and all the parts of the world. There is now that the religion, how it started, how Christianity started, how Jesus said like what he wants from us, and how people changed it and how it changed over time. Like there is specifically how a church would look like, how people would dress, or how everything would be happen. And it just changed the whole vibe or whole feeling of how a church was supposed to be. And now that we have Bible, I go to Bible reading with Greg, and I feel like that's my church, because I don't want to go to a big building and where people just sit and would hear somebody speak. Rather, I would go to a place where there are just 5 people who listen to what's going on in each other's life and would even advise them. I think that's more of a church for me. And that's how it started. Not like, you have to be in a specific, you have to come on Sunday on this time and then just have to follow. And that's the same thing that I feel like, just because you are born Christian doesn't mean that you're a Christian. Like just because I was born Hindu doesn't make me a Hindu. So, I mean, the first Christians, the believers of Christ, weren't even Christians, So all this is so different. And it's a different journey for everybody. It's not that you're born into something. When you start believing, when you actually follow him, that's when you change.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Gospel Addict Podcast. Feel free to contact us via email at gospeladdictpodcast@gmail.com.
Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, on your worst days, you're never beyond the reach of God's grace, and on your best days, you're never beyond the need of God's grace.
See you next time.